for Mr. Stark?
Jim, do you think it's?
I believe we can begin. I'm not sure that we have a quorum yet, but Representative, thank you very much.
Okay, well, I think a lot of our stuff is presentation, so maybe once we get quorum, we'll just kind of move the minutes approval to whatever the last presentation finishes up, because that's really the only business we have. Is that correct?
Yes, are you seeing my screen, Representative?
Yep, looks great.
So, Madam Chair, this is the agenda for today.
Okay.
Just as a reminder, these are the members of the subcommittee.
Lovely.
And we're beginning with the presentation on the university's 50-year water plan. So with that, I'll ask them to come to the dais.
Well, I'm actually, let me.
Chair and members of the subcommittee, thank you so much for inviting us here today. My name is Dr. Melissa Kenny, and I serve as the co-principal investigator for the 50-year Clean Water Plan.
My name is Melissa Mueller, and I serve as the project manager for the 50-year Clean Water Plan. We appreciate the opportunity to come before you to brief you on our scope, timeline, and budget for a 50-year Clean Water Plan for Minnesota. On May 24th, 2023, the Governor signed into law Chapter 60, House File Number 2310, Article 9, Section 12, which granted money to the University of Minnesota for the Water Council to develop a scope, timeline, and budget for a plan to promote and protect clean water in Minnesota for the next 50 years. As stated in the legislative language, the plan itself must provide a literature-based assessment of the current status and trends regarding the quality and quantity of all Minnesota waters, both surface and subsurface, identify gaps in data or understanding, and provide recommended action steps to address the gaps, identify existing and potential future threats to Minnesota's waters, and propose a roadmap of scenarios and policy recommendations to allow the state to proactively protect, remediate, and conserve clean water for human use and biodiversity for the next 50 years. We are not, however, preparing the plan at this time. The plan itself would be funded through future legislative action in fiscal year 25 or beyond. I will now turn it over to Dr. Kenny for information about our task forces and scope of work.
Thank you, Melissa. To complete the 50-year Clean Water Plan, the University of Minnesota will establish 4 interdisciplinary water task forces. Each water task force will be driven by specific expertise towards completing the plan. The first of these is a Partner and Engagement Needs Assessment Task Force. This task force will engage partners and communities, assess needs, and communicate deliverables. The second is a Data and Decision Support Task Force. This will review and use available literature, data, databases, and decision support tools to recommend action steps related to data, gaps, and to use decision support tools to inform policy. Third is a Scenario and Forecasting Task Force. This will construct, compare, and evaluate various scenarios and pathways towards clean water via data forecasting out to the years 2050 and 2075. This gives us a long-term horizon over which to assess whether our current plans, programs, policies, and appropriations are adequate not only to achieve clean water, but also mitigate existing and future potential threats to Minnesota's waters. And fourth, the Policy and Action Steps Task Force will evaluate existing policy and planning approaches, develop alternative policy scenarios, and provide specific and targeted policy and programmatic recommendations. Additional interdisciplinary water task forces will be established to address specific issues of high concern and emerging threats as needed or directed. These task forces represent an interdisciplinary mix of physical sciences, social sciences, and policy experts, among others. On December 1st, 2023, we delivered the scope, timeline, budget that outlines the steps required to complete the 50-year Clean Water Plan. As required in the legislative language, we outlined the scope of work. This includes the data sets that are required and how the University of Minnesota will obtain access, the suite of proposed analysis methods, the roles and responsibilities of project leaders, key personnel, and stakeholders, and a budget with expected costs and tasks and milestones. We are excited to deliver the first step toward a 50-year clean water plan and for the opportunity to serve Minnesotans in pursuit of clean water. That concludes our prepared remarks. We thank you for your time and attention and look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Madam Chair, if I could ask a question, this is Rep. Fisher.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you for
Thank you to our testifiers. Thank you for being here today. Tell us a little bit more about the sustainability framework as we're going forward. I know that we've had past studies in the past where we've looked at the sustainability. How is that being incorporated into this, and how does that relate?
Meaning, can you describe a little bit more about what you mean by sustainability?
In terms of sustainability, I'm talking about long-term to make sure that what we're doing today will be sustainable for the future generations. And when I talk about sustainability, it's from a couple of different areas, is making sure that we have the capacity to continue doing the work in the area, and also what are the potential barriers that may be out there that we'll have to be addressing.
Thank you for the question. So in terms of sustainability of the plan, a number of the scope of work that related to the types of approaches or potential, the state of clean water, as well as potential opportunities to make modifications that would allow for balancing between human uses and environmental uses would be developed as part of any plan that were developed. This is a plan meeting the legislative requirements for what it would take to develop a plan for 50 years, for a 50-year clean water task force.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Co-Chair Hemmingson-Niegert. Just being new, could you kind of describe, I guess, if you have a vision or plan or philosophy on how all these groups are going to work together? Because handling surface water, for example, could probably its own plan. Handling groundwater, aquifers could be another plan. So if you could just maybe take us a little bit higher level and kind of describe like your overall players' approach and how you're kind of going to handle all this.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for the question, Chair. I think how we're going to coordinate things is we're convening all these players, all different stakeholders, subsurface, surface waters, and our job is to bring that together and support what's already going on as best as possible. We are not trying to recreate anything. We're trying to leverage both experts and data from across all these different parties who are affiliated with water in the state of Minnesota.
The responsibility of convening different groups of people is the First Water Task Force, which is a partner and engagement and needs task force. The Clean Water partners that were identified include but are not limited to representatives from state departments, agencies, boards and offices, legislative committees, subcommittees and commissions, international, federal, state, regional, and local governments, and non-governmental organizations, tribes, water districts, water management organizations, soil and water conservation districts, private industry, nonprofits, and residents of Minnesota. So while we use the term stakeholder, it is used, since the term stakeholder was specifically used within the legislative request, this scope of work will instead use Clean Water Partners. So when you see Clean Water Partners, it refers to all of those different entities to represent all of the groups of people that the University of Minnesota would engage throughout this process. And we agree that it is a very important and very important task to bring those folks together. And as described in the plan that was delivered on December 1st, additional task forces related to specific issues, whether they be emerging contaminant issues or issues that the state requests, would be able to be established as part of a framework given the structure of this plan.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you for your
Excited to
time.
kind of see the work unfold.
Hello. Madam Chair,
Yes.
the next presentation is from the Met Council. Judy Sventek and Sam Paskey are here. They're going to talk about metro area water supply planning, the process, and the timeline, outlook, and updates. So with that, they are in front of the room here, and welcome Sam and Judy.
And I would just like to say an extra thank you for your patience and flexibility, as I know you have been bounced around a couple meetings. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm Judy Sventek, and from the Metropolitan Council, I'm the manager of the Water Resources section there, and I'm here with Sam Paskey, the Assistant General Manager for Planning and Environmental Services. And we're here today to talk about our role in water supply planning and the work that we're doing right now in that area. It's not advancing. Okay, that one, sorry. Okay, thank you. So our presentation today will provide high-level information about the metro area's water supply role, the planning framework that we are currently working under to address some of the big concerns in the region that we're working with our stakeholders to wrestle with. At the end, I'll update you all about a high-profile piece of work, the White Bear Lake Water Sustainability Project. I won't spend much time on this slide, but I've included this mostly for your reference so you can learn more about the history of the Council's water supply planning work. In 2005, Statute 473-1565 was passed, which really better define the role that we have in water supply planning for the metropolitan area. Under the statute, the council is responsible for specific regional water supply planning activities, which include, I see that I've gone one too far, but I will just go ahead and say what I was going to say on that slide, which will include providing technical information, making recommendations about roles and responsibilities, streamlining water supply planning, and providing funding to help implement studies and projects so that we can better plan for water supply issues in the metro area. Part of this is a responsibility to develop a metro area water supply plan. This plan is prepared in cooperation with and subject to approval by the Policy Advisory Committee, which is our Metro Area Water Supply Advisory Committee, or MASAC, and is informed by our Technical Advisory Committee. This slide includes the current membership group for MASAC and TAC. Right now, we're in the process of having members reappointed, so I do not have specific names up there, but you can see that MASAC is made up of state agencies, appointments from Minneapolis Waterworks, as well as St. Paul Regional Water Services, and then we have representatives from the metro counties and the 4 surrounding counties as well. And then TAC is members from the cities within the region that have expertise in hydrology, water resource analysis, engineering, and planning. The required metro area water supply plan is the one document updated every 10 years as part of our overall regional planning process and cycle. The planning cycle started in the beginning of it starts with the census, which provides information related to update our forecast of employment and population. And after that, we get input from on the issues that we need to update in the regional development guide, including the water supply plan update. With input from many partners, we developed the current regional development guide and the water supply plan. We'll be holding informational meetings on those plans, and then we'll be officially adopting them later next year. Another way to look at how our planning work ties together is shown on this slide. This slide illustrates key pieces of the region's water planning framework, including how water supply planning is connected to the regional policy and the regional development guide. Note that this process to develop these pieces is more iterative than the diagram appears. It is not entirely a linear process. There's a lot of back and forth to ensure that these different areas are aligned. So we are now in the middle of the process for updating the metropolitan area's surface water plan and the water supply plan. We started by looking at 4 goal areas that we developed in the 2022 MASAC report to the legislature, and we've added a 5th goal since that report was sent to you. Another new approach that we are taking is, and something that we've repeatedly heard from our stakeholders, is that we need a lot more information and input from our partners on this process. So we have set up working with subregions that cover all of the metropolitan area that are providing input on the new issues, the new concerns, and the new areas that we should be addressing in this version of the Metro Area Water Supply Plan. From this, we've had several meetings so far, and we will continue these meetings until next year. Like what I said, with the intent of having a draft Metro Area Water Supply Plan available for public input in June. But what we're really seeing here is there's some common challenges across the region, and these common challenges including things like need for more money to do the work, need for more conservation to get to our goals. Growth is impacting how we can grow. Climate is impacting things. There's contamination concerns, and then there's a lot of concerns about how these communities are going to actually keep their infrastructure up to date and manage their water supply systems and deal with workforce limitations that they are having. While the high-level challenge goals apply across the region, the ways they play out can be very different based on different water supply sources. For instance, if the water supply is from the Jordan Aquifer versus the Mississippi River, and the different types of water users that we have versus agriculture versus urban residential. A few specific examples of how these play out locally include the well interference situation that you may have been hearing about in Blaine and Ham Lake. We are working right now with communities in the West Metro to develop a multi-community wellhead protection plan to see if we can explore that opportunity with them for the West Metro that can then be used at other places, because it's the communities have their source water protection areas crossover, so it's important to look at how we kind of work on these plans together. And then there's water supply infrastructure planning needs in Woodbury. This slide lists other considerations that were identified for us to take into consideration as we develop the new Metro water supply plan. Just gonna highlight a few, and key things are that funding is really needed to help implement the plans and help implement practices and have our partners develop good emergency responses. There needs to be continued coordination across political boundaries is very critical. Proposals that have the most impact when they advance multiple goals at one time. The council is about getting to the end of the plan development process, as I mentioned, for the 2050 Regional Development Guide, which includes our water policy plan and the metro area water supply plan. In the coming year, we will continue to work with our stakeholders across the regions to develop the water supply related content, which will be out for formal public review, I'm assuming somewhere around July of next year. And then the goal is to have it adopted by the end of 2024. I'm gonna switch now to giving you an update on the White Bear Lake area project, which was a project that came out as a result of the last legislative session. We are looking into the water supply issues in that Northeast Metro, and collectively with our partners in that area, coming up with a comprehensive plan in that area that will provide for sufficient drinking water to allow for growth while ensuring sustainability of the surface water and groundwater resources in the area. With where we're at with this project is we, throughout this year, we've been meeting with all the communities and the agency partners one-on-one, just to kind of get the initial ideas from our partners who are a part of the working group to help us define this project, to understand where they're all coming from. We are in the process of finalizing a contract to hire a communications firm to help facilitate the difficult conversations that we'll be having with the work group over the next few years. We hope to have them on board by the end of the year yet. Then we'll be kicking off our official work group meeting in January of next year. Over the next year, we'll be digging into the studies that will need to be updated as part of this work. We'll be getting input, of course, from the work group on these new studies that are needed throughout 2024 and 2025, and helping us refine those studies, look at the responses from those studies and the recommendations in those studies. And then we'll be reviewing those reports and preparing this comprehensive report that will be submitted back to you in June of 2027. We do have a website up and running on our council webpage that you can get updates on the White Bear Lake project. It talks about timing, meetings that are coming up, and where things are at. So that will be available, and that is up and running. And I know I didn't have very much time to talk about where we're at, but I just kind of highlighted where we're at with our planning work and our process of updating the Metropolitan Water Supply Plan and then the White Bear Lake project. We have a lot more going on in water supply at the Metropolitan Council. So if you'd like to hear any more detail about any of the other projects that we're funding or working on, let us know. We'd be happy to come back. Otherwise, there's a link on your screen that can get you to information that gives you more about the overall work that we're doing. So with that, thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, Sam and I are here to answer them.
Thank you very much. I have a couple questions that I would like to open it up to other members to see if they have any questions first.
Madam Chair, this is Representative Fittish. I've got a couple of questions if I could jump ahead first.
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. First of all, thank you, Ms. Sventic, for your presentation. A couple of questions are going to be across the different areas that you're presenting. Is you're mentioning that there are new issues and concerns that people are expressing out there. Can you give us a little bit more idea what those kind of concerns and issues are?
Sure. So the issues that we're hearing about are need for more money to help solve the issues around water supply. There's the issues in around the White Bear Lake situation, which you're very familiar with, and the need to figure out how we can allow growth and more water appropriation that's needed for growth while we're trying to protect the White Bear Lake. There's issues with contamination and PFAS. The people are dealing with PFAS in their wells, so trying to look for if they have other options for water sources. Similar, there's issues in the western Hennepin County with they don't have access to the Prairie du Chien Jordan aquifer, so they're just looking for more sources. They just don't have a great source, so they're trying to figure out how they're gonna supply the growth that is being planned. Those are a lot of those issues. Then as there's well interference situations that are happening in Blaine and Ham Lake where the Blaine wells that were put into production are impacting some of the private wells in that area. So these are the types of issues people are dealing with, as well as we've been hearing from the communities a lot, they're worried about how they're gonna be able to keep maintaining their facilities because of the workforce shortages and just not having enough workforce people in the area that they need to help with, running their facilities. So they're looking at those types of concerns. And then a lot of it is really about, needing funding for new infrastructure, rehabilitating their infrastructure. There's also, the lead pipe situation that we're hearing about as well.
Okay, thank you. I was kind of wondering if the lead pipe issue
Yes.
was going to be part of that
Yes.
question. And one of the questions I have is when you talk about contaminations out there, are there other areas of the metro that have been experiencing some of the problems with, whether it's PFAS? I think TCE was another one that was surfacing in some of the area water supplies. What has been happening in that area? Is that in terms of being able to detect to make sure we're protecting people's water supplies going forward?
Sure. So we're not responsible for monitoring or assessing the wells, so that is other agencies, so they would have more information than I would have on that. I know that as part of everybody's appropriation permits and their permits with the state agencies, they do have to monitor for certain contaminants. I know that you've heard over the years that nitrate is a concern in Hastings, and PFAS is being measured more across the region. I couldn't speak to specifically how much more and where, so.
Thank you. And one of the things that I know that makes it a little bit more challenging is you folks are more of a planning. You don't run any of the water systems out there.
Correct.
And that's what makes it very difficult. What are some of the challenges that you're finding when you're working with the different communities out there? Because it feels to me like people are very parochial in their own community systems. But when a problem comes up, it doesn't feel like things are very well connected or we're scrambling. And like when I take a look at what's happening out in the East Metro is you've got communities right now that are not able to build schools, they're not building schools. And also how does that impact, and there's different communities where they can no longer have portable water and they can't get it from anywhere. How can we get ahead of that type of situation in the future? In other words, what are the kind of tools that you folks need that might be from us or from somewhere else so that we can be ahead and not be in this type of situation playing catch up in the future?
Sure, thank you for the question. So one of the things I mentioned was the sub-regional planning groups that we have. So we have really just started those up across the metro area. We had a few before that covered parts of the metro area. We are really hoping that will be an opportunity to bring those communities together so they can have these conversations about what's going on with their neighbor, how they can work together on things. And so we can address some of these things and start to find out more about where these interconnections and the working together can happen. Like I said, very early in that process, but we're hoping to continue that beyond just the helping us develop our plan. We would like to continue that and have those meetings and those groups meet together, as long as we need to, just to kind of keep working on those issues. I think the other, another area that we do have funding for that we did fund is that 3 pilot wellhead protection plan project in the West Metro where the communities are coming together to work on a wellhead protection plan for all of them so they can kind of see how what they're doing within each community might be overlapping. I think we'll see more of that as we have more of these pilots done and we can provide that information. So we're just, we've always been working with all the communities, but it's been, we look at the comp plans one-on-one, at a time kind of thing. We're trying to really broaden that and really make it so that we're looking more together with all the communities, also looking at things not just related to a water supply issue, but what's going on with the wastewater, with the water supply and the surface water management are all interconnected and trying to begin to address those more thoroughly. So we will have tools available that through our comprehensive planning process to help communities do their comp plans related to these issues. We also are hoping to gain from these sub-regional meetings that we're having, what are some key projects that might warrant being like a multi-community project or a sub-regional project that we can help fund with some of the money that we are getting from the Clean Water Fund for that work.
Yes. And then I've got another question, and this is probably my final one, is you're talking about the reuse, which I've been hearing some very unique things that are happening out there. I know that Met Council is looking at some point in the North Metro of building another treatment plant, and that water would be available to try and figure, 1 billion gallons a year that could help meet needs up there. Has there been any work in terms of land planning around where that might go? And where I'm coming from is that water is available for reuse. And we've got such a shortage up in that area. Are there things that are being taken a look at? Are there industries that might be able to reuse that water? And what is being done to think if we're going to be building a plant up there, how do we work with local communities to address zoning, et cetera, so that we can help set up a system where that water be easy to get to them for them to reuse? You hear what I'm getting at, is that longer time of thinking of changing how we've done our systems, and then also what does that mean we have to look at in terms of plumbing codes and that kind of things, which I know is a little different space, but what are things that we have to be ready to start responding to here to be able to make some of these unique things happen so that we're being using our water in a more sustainable way?
Sure, I'll start with the answer, then maybe Sam can add to that. So we are like in the process of, we will be building a new plant we took over the Rogers plant, so we'll be building a new plant in the Crow River watershed. So up there, just west of Rogers probably, we're siting land, we're looking at land. As we're developing new plants, we're also moving the Hastings plant from downtown to a different location. We are looking into all of our options as we are developing these new plants. Can they be more of reclamation facilities? Who might be the partners? How might we partner with people to reuse the water? We've had several projects, or one project in particular that we looked into with an industry prior to this that was asking for maybe treated effluent for reuse. And that project, it turned out there was a lot of, we had conversations, but there was a lot of obstacles with, there was too much chloride in our treated effluent and things like that. So I think we'll be looking at what changes are actually needed and to help us make wastewater reuse more viable, more cost effective. But we are looking into that as we are planning these new facilities, and we're really looking to try and go from just a metropolitan disposal system to more of a reclamation system. So,
sure, yeah, I'll add a little bit. That was a really good answer though, Judy. And I apologize if I'm muffled, I'm getting over a virus. Can you hear me okay? As Judy said, we are pivoting from, if you look in statute, the system in the region that reclaims wastewater is called a disposal system. We dispose of that resource in statute. So we're looking at, is that the right way to characterize our work? We're investing a lot of money every day in reclaiming that resource for a natural use. It goes into the rivers, but that's groundwater that goes into the rivers. Hundreds of millions of gallons of groundwater goes into the rivers and then out of the region. Is there a better answer? And we think there is. As Judy mentioned, groundwater replenishment, some kinds of direct reuse of that treated wastewater, purified water, that could be of value to the region. So we'd like to continue advancing along that course. That might require some statutory language changes as well to authorize that work. At the end of the day, though, there isn't a single answer. Just doing that won't solve all the issues. We have to come together, and that's the council's role. We're not a water supplier, a drinking water supplier, but we might be a wastewater reuse supplier of some kind someday. And putting all those solutions together by working with all the parties at the local and the state level, I think that's the sustainable approach for us.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Senator Weber here.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a couple of things. I know that in the past, the legislature has been approached about the lack of schools and hospitals being on water priority lists. Just wondering, is that the water prioritization, is that a decision that is made by the Met Council for the area, metro area?
No, that is a DNR water prioritization.
Okay. Also, I think, part of the issue we're encountering probably is the fact that we have somewhat of a older communities, more developed versus the newer, continuing to be developed communities in terms of water usage and what have you. And it was mentioned that, one of the issues, like for example, in the reuse of water, is the chloride issue. Obviously, chlorine is a part of the treatment process. Does the Met Council spend any efforts or monies towards research of new ways to treat water that eliminate some of that, some of those issues? I know in my area, which is a rural area, we have the MPCA making requirements of communities that they have to have less chloride in the water than the water coming from the ground already has. And so sometimes our rules and regulations seem to get in the way of a number of things. But does the Met Council discuss that and pursue that issue?
So first off, most of the chloride that we're seeing in our treated effluent is not from the treatment process. A lot of it's coming from water softening that's done by, that's coming into our system from households and if communities are using any kind of chloride for treatment. So a lot of it's from that. But yeah, we are looking at, we're always looking at ways to like improve our treatment practices. We have looked at what it would take to take the chloride out, for example, and it would, require reverse osmosis, which is very costly depending on the size of the facility, but it's not out of the question for some of the smaller facilities that we're thinking about putting in the future. So.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, Representative Scraba.
Yes, go ahead, Representative Scraba.
Thank you. Just a couple of maybe my observations. One, maybe to solve the fact that you can't build more schools or hospitals or whatever in this area, that the growth should happen in greater Minnesota and not in the metro area. The other comment about treating the water, I'm on capital investments and we just toured the state, and I can't tell you how many facilities, water treatment facilities that are trying to treat the water so the individuals don't have to use the salt, because the problem is in the wastewater treatment. So we're trying to fight the salt tablets to soften the water or harden whatever they do. In Ely, we don't have that problem. We've got really good water. But that seems to be more of what the solution is becoming. These communities want to fix their water treatment plant, not their wastewater, so that what comes out is easier and better to deal with, so.
And that's what we're seeing as well. There are a few lime softening plants in the metropolitan area already, so they're using that as their treatments in their softening process, and then that would get away from that chloride use.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Anybody else? Otherwise, I have a couple questions. Cool. So we have a lot of organizations and groups that are doing plans and planning for plans. And I guess a couple questions with that. Do you anticipate either working with the U of M or following U of M guidance or recommendations as they develop this 50-year clean water plan? Like, would you overlap at all?
Sure. I do anticipate at some point we will work with them on this project. We haven't officially been asked at this point to my knowledge, but we have worked with them on like the framework they've done in the past, and we also sit on the interagency coordination team where I'm sure this plan will be discussed, where we'll have some input through that. So.
Great, thank you. And then, so Met Council has lots of different authorities. Do you work across the different commissions, say transportation, as you guys are developing water treatment plans and water plans?
I'm not sure of the question exactly. I mean, so we only have the wastewater treatment plants that we have authority over and that we own and operate. And we do work with all the agencies that we need to work with on permits and regulations in order to operate those. Is that what you were getting? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, that helps clarify things, and maybe that kind of takes it up a level to the greater Met Council regional planning, as they're more taking input from transportation and from you when it comes to the overall infrastructure of their plans.
Sure. So the other part of the council, the Transportation Planning Service area, they are working with MnDOT and the transportation planners across the region for that part of it, and environmental services where we are at. I've worked with transportation or MnDOT and others on road planning as it relates to road planning and doing proper stormwater practices, but not particularly in how they're designing. But you know, the other arm of the Met Council is working closely with MnDOT on the transportation needs.
Okay, great, thank you. Those are my questions. One last call. All right, thank you so much for the presentation and for your time.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting us today.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, sir.
this is Jim Stark. I'd just like to thank the speakers for being here today, and it's taken us a couple of meetings to get to you, but thank you for that presentation. It was very informative. There's a lot going on. Thank you. So our next presentation is about the reauthorization of the Agricultural Fertilizer Research and Education Council, and with us today is Bruce Montgomery. Bruce is a retired MDA employee and works with the council, and Margaret Wagner is here as well.
As you guys are getting seated, since we have a quorum present, can we do a quick motion and approval of the November minutes?
So moved. Representative Scrava.
Okay. Thank you. Do we need a second?
I will second it.
Thank you. Could you please say who that was?
Senator Kupak?
Okay, thank you. All right, we got a motion and a second. Voice vote to approve the minutes. Aye.
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 Opposed? Nay. Nay. Okay, we'll approve those minutes. Thank you very much. Business is good. We did our business. All right. So our next AFREC presentation, thank you very much for your time, and please proceed.
Very good. Good morning. For the record, again, my name is Bruce Montgomery, and I'm currently the research coordinator for what's called the AFREC Council. So I retired 5 years ago. I could tell this morning it took 10 attempts to get my tie tied, so I guess I've been retired for a while. But thank you for the opportunity to be here. With me is Margaret Wagner. She's the section manager of the Fertilizer Non-Point section at the Department of Agriculture. And the Department of Ag is a real key critical partner in this program. I know we're limited on time, so I'm going to really kind of breeze through this as quickly as I can, allow some time for questions from Margaret and I. But what we'd like to do is just talk a little bit about the program. This was developed back about 15 years ago. At that time, the ag community had some very serious concerns about whether or not our fertilizer guidelines and the research that went along with those fertilizer guidelines were up to date. There was a lot of feeling that we're getting behind, and I think there was a lot of farmer concern, a lot of concerns from our dealerships that the university recommendations were not keeping pace with the rapidly changing yields and so forth technology. So this is a program that was actually requested by the ag community. The Department of Ag helped foster that along with a number of key legislators back in around 2008 and 2009. And again, the goal is to focus on fertilizer and soil fertility management. Since 2009, when the program was officially developed, AFREC has invested about $13 million into soil fertility research and associated educational programs. So what this program provides is making sure the mission is to focus on fertilizer efficiency. With that then comes farm profitability and the environmental benefits that come along with that. AFREC does much more than just provides funding. It also provides a significant amount of leadership between all the other organizations that have fertilizer checkoff programs, such as Minnesota corn growers, potato growers, soybean, and so forth. So AFREC has really kind of become the cornerstone for coordinating. And so for the first time, all of these groups are sitting in the same room talking to each other about the common goals and rotations. There's a little bit of history, legislative history to this program. Don't have time to go into it today, but this program has gone through several extensions over the last 15 years, some slight modifications in how it has operated. But by and large, this program works amazingly efficiently, in my estimation. The way this thing is funded is that farmers pay the vast majority of this program. It generates about $1.2 million a year, and that comes from a 40-cent ton on all fertilizer products sold in the state of Minnesota. So what that means for a Minnesota farmer on average, and these are very generic numbers, it's probably costing the grower about 5 to 6 cents an acre per year to run this program. About 1 to 1.2 million, again, is available every year. This goes out as an RFP. The Department of Ag handles that portion of it, issues the RFP, so it's a competitive bid process. This is open to anybody who wants to apply, but in reality, the vast majority of these dollars do go to the University of Minnesota, either the Department of Soil, Water, and Climate, or the Agronomy Department, or our research stations would be the most common place where these funds end up. The council is run by 12 councils. They make all the decisions on the funding. Department of Ag and the university, as well as the bean growers, are ex officios and provide some guidance on that. But we have a really highly functional advisory group that we work with. We've put together a legislative fact sheet for you. We know you're busy, and if you have an opportunity to pull this up at a later time, hopefully you'll find this helpful. There's one key piece of information on there, and that's where our website is if you'd like to find more legislative materials, or where all of the reports and all the research can be found at this website. So kind of sum things up. What this program does is it develops unbiased and scientifically defensible fertilizer guidelines and the associated best management practices, or in industry they call it the 4 R's. As you wrestle with things like the Southeast water quality issues, please keep in mind that all of these recommendations from the university are virtually funded either all by AFREC or affiliated AFREC projects. We've made some fantastic gains, I think, particularly over the last 6 to 7 years with fertilizer outreach. And we now have communication specialists at Extension that really make sure all of this information gets out the door to growers in a wide variety of formats, including podcasts and conferences and so forth. Department, like I said, is a key player in this. They have to handle all the contracts and grants. Since this program started, there's been about 250 awards made, so this is an amazing amount of work that has to be done in partnership with SPA at the University of Minnesota. And again, this program really kind of serves as the cornerstone for all soil fertility research going on in the state. So the reason we're here today is just to make sure that you're aware of that legislatively. This program is set to sunset in June of this coming year. So that means the Department of Ag can no longer collect the fees unless something is done this legislative session. All the 11 supporting farm groups that make up AFREC want the program to continue. We have letters on file from each of the organizations, and what their ask is to keep the program intact, to keep it at 40 cents a ton, retain the existing program structure, and they're asking for a reauthorization for the next 10 years in 18C and the affiliated statutes that go along with that. So, Margaret, do you have any comments that you'd like to add before we wrap it up?
No, no comments, Dad. Thank you very much, Bruce, and I'll just sit for questions if there's anything I can help to answer.
Madam Chair, we'd be happy to answer any questions for the council or for the committee.
Great, thank you. That was very informative, very concise, and bravo for getting through it in good time for questions. So any questions from the members?
Yes, oh, sorry, Madam Chair, yes, one quick question, Representative Scraba. Are the farmers still in favor of this? Are they still supportive of it?
Yeah, I would say very, very highly supportive. That's why we wanted to make sure all our council members, went back to their organizations and talked to their groups and get these letters on file and make sure that there's a high level of support for this. You know, it's a very small amount, but it's a critical portion of how we get things done.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair, Representative Fisher?
Yes, go ahead, Representative Fisher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. One of the questions I have is trying to learn a little bit more about what is being presented today. I was hearing you mention that there are research projects that are being done each year that are being funded. Can you give me a little bit more detailed idea of what some of these projects look like, what they involve, how they're being applied, either you know, at the farm campus or out in actual practice in the fields? If I could get some more information about that and a little bit more description of that, it would be helpful for me.
I'd be happy to try to tackle that to start with, and then we'll have Margaret chime in if needed. But yeah, most of this research, as I said, goes to the University of Minnesota. I'm not sure what the percentages of what research goes on at our research stations, such as Lamberton and Waseca and so forth. But what's happened over the last 15 years, and originally when AFREC first started, we had a lot of catch up to do on our fertilizer recommendations. As I said, we had so many genetic changes over the years. The yield potentials have gone up so dramatically. Our weed management, our tillage, all those things have changed drastically over the last 20, 25 years. So in the infancy of AFREC, we invested a lot of money on making sure our our fertilizer recommendations were brought up to speed. So that meant a lot of rate work, trying to find what those optimum rates are going to be that optimize yields but yet minimize environmental problems. And now we've kind of passed that. I mean, I think there's a great deal of confidence in these recommendations for corn and wheat and all of our other crops. But what's happened now is we're really starting to wrestle with some much more complicated things like carbon and soil health. And climate change is a real big one because of our climate patterns are changing. Our soil temperatures are warmer longer. We're having higher mineralization. There's just a lot of complicating factors that go on. And to get that work done, it really takes long-term commitment. And what AFREC does is it provides continuity in these research programs. So some of these, it's not going to be uncommon that these projects will go on for 8 to 15 years. And to find federal funding or to find funding elsewhere, very, very difficult to do that. And that's why this in-home money is so critical. Margaret, did you have anything you'd like to add?
Sure, thank you. So for the record, I'm Margaret Wagner. I manage the fertilizer and non-point section at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. I think I'll add just a few key things. So this is kind of university level research. It's peer reviewed and replicated research. As mentioned, it's a competitive process. So each year a request for proposal is issued, and that request for proposal is based on priorities that were selected by the council that year. And so projects are selected based on those priorities and the biggest needs. Just for a few examples, I think, Representative, we've had projects on irrigation scheduling, so really managing the timing and amount of water needed for irrigation, and to further evaluate something called deficit irrigation, or applying a little bit less than the soil may need, and see the response to the crop in that way. We've also had some soil health and drainage projects, looking at that relationship between those, the practice of drainage and the impacts on soil health. We've been able to support some long-term nitrogen response trials, so really looking at some of those activities over multiple years and building confidence in those university recommendations. There's been recommendations based on sulfur requirements as a micronutrient for edible beans, and long-term approaches to phosphorus management. So those are just a few examples. We do have all of those research projects and reports online. And I'll just mention that across the council, there's a variety of crops and cropping systems that are supported. So you can imagine almost everything that's grown in Minnesota has seen a research project come through AFREC. So corn, soybeans, wheat, sugar beets, dry beans, wild rice, alfalfa, sweet corn, peas, potatoes, rye, and cover crops. So as we talk about this program, it is broader than just some main commodity crops and really covers the acreage across Minnesota.
Thank you, and that's kind of what I wanted, just trying to get a better idea of the coverage, and I really appreciate that. And what helped intrigue me is the fact that you're looking at this combination of what happens with soil health, taking a look at how the impact of cover crops can require the need of, or reduce the need for that use of fertilizer in the future, et cetera. So I'm glad that we're looking at a wider range of things. So thank you for that, appreciate it. And that's all the questions I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, great questions. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you. I found this really, really cool. So thank you for coming in and presenting.
Thank you very much for having us.
I think we're on to Mr. Stark.
Madam Chair, members, I'd like to say a few words about the nitrate issue that we have spent so much time on, and then a little bit about legislation. Mina, can you allow me to share my screen? Thank you. Okay, Madam Chair and members, just a few words about the nitrate issue in southeastern Minnesota. We're awaiting a response from the agencies to the EPA. We have members from both Ag and Health here today who I think are willing, including the Assistant Commissioner, who I think are willing to say a few words about that process. Just generally though, as a bit of an update, the petition asks responsible parties to provide free water testing and safe drinking water to impacted communities. It asks for public notice regarding hazards during the process of returning drinking water to safe condition. It asks for a prohibition on new confined animal feeding operations and existing CAFOs from expanding until the nitrate concentrations in contaminated wells reach safe levels. And it asks for a modification of manure and fertilizer application practices. In the short term, it asks for increased free water screening opportunities, for certified lab water tests for those that fail screenings, for educational materials about health and water treatment, and incentives and credits for treatment at the kitchen tap, and support for agency responses to the EPA requests. So with that, if the staff from the agencies are willing to give us an update on where things are, that'd be very helpful. Welcome to the subcommittee, and for this, Madam Chair, would you kindly introduce yourselves and give us a little update? Thank you.
Well, good morning and thank you, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Dan Huff. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Health Protection at the Minnesota Department of Health.
And for the record, my name is Tanny Eschenauer, and I manage the Water Policy Center at the Minnesota Department of Health.
Yes, and good morning. I'm Margaret Wagner, and I manage the non-point fertilizer section at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture.
So, good morning. I'm happy to provide some background. And first of all, I do want to apologize that we at MDH were not represented or we're not here for your questions at your last committee meeting, but we're happy to be here today. In April, a group of 11 petitioners, led by the Minnesota Center for Environmental Advocacy, petitioned the U.S. EPA under the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act regarding nitrate in drinking water in 8 counties in southeast Minnesota. Those counties are Dodge, Fillmore, Goodhue, Houston, Mower, Olmsted, Wabasha, and Winona counties. The EPA sent the Minnesota Department of Health, the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency a letter last month, November 3rd, requesting that the state respond to that petition, particularly outlining both immediate response and longer-term response items. EPA outlined that their top priority is to protect human health by ensuring that residents impacted by nitrate in their drinking water were identified, that we provided notice, and that we provided an alternative drinking water source based upon prioritization of most vulnerable populations. As a result, the 3 agencies have been working together, and our commissioners submitted a response letter to the EPA regional administrator on Friday. And we will make sure that everyone in this committee receives a copy of that letter. In that, we have outlined that we take this very seriously. We shared many of the activities that our state is already doing, and that we will be submitting a thorough plan of our immediate response by January 15th. The EPA in their letter also state that they expect that the state will look at sources of nitrate and reduce the amount of nitrate input into drinking water sources. We, among the 3 agencies, are dividing up our work. MDH, because we have primary responsibility for safe drinking water in the state, will be leading the first phase of the response, which is focused on drinking water wells. And then MDA and MPCA will be working on that longer term response with other partners and other agencies looking at nitrate source reduction. And I'll turn it over to my colleague at MDA to see if there's anything that she'd like to add.
No. Thank you. Again, my name's Margaret Wagner, for the record. Nothing to add, just that the state agencies are working very closely together, thinking about immediate actions that could be taken now, and then developing both budgets and recommendations for both intermediate and long-term activities, many of those continuation of programs that we have invested in Southeast Minnesota to address this concern.
Great. Thank you very much.
Madam Chair, Senator Weber here.
Yes, sir.
One of the questions that I have for you is that there's been a number of new and nitrogen management practices adopted in recent years. And obviously my question, there's a degree of variability depending upon what area you are in at the time. But as it relates to the karst area of southeastern Minnesota, can you give me an idea of on an average, of how long it takes for water to get to the drinking wells that are being discussed?
Yeah, Senator Weber, thanks for that question. So related to the age of groundwater, it really varies, actually, even within that karst region of southeast Minnesota, depending on both where you are in that landscape, so the geology that's above that well, as well as the depth to that individual well. So it really, that question about age comes into play. We really need to consider where we are both in the landscape and within the aquifers. So we have talked about in this committee previously that we've done some age dating along with the USGS, so the United States Geologic Survey. So together as partners using techniques to date some of the groundwater in that area. So for that particular study, as we looked at a community around Altura, that the age of that groundwater came back with a mean age of between 30 and 40 years. So When we talk about age of groundwater, it's a proportion, so it varies. It's not just one age. And when we talk about a mean, we're looking at both that young and older water and what is the average age of that water. And that's really important because as we consider about thinking about changing practices on the landscape and looking for a response in water quality, we want to set our expectations so that practices today we can be reflected in that water quality evaluation. I think it's important to mention as we think about implementation of practices in the age of groundwater, it creates, it's complex. But what we do know is practices today and the practices we implement make a difference. So we really think about what we can do today and then at what time scale can we monitor those changes appropriately.
Very good, thank you.
Madam Chair, Representative Fisher here.
Yep, go ahead, Representative Fisher.
Thank you. Couple of questions I have is, first of all, in terms of the situation that we're in now, is that we have wells out there, private wells, et cetera, where we've got issues. What is being done in the short term to address that type of issue, and what are the costs that might be associated with helping make sure that people have clean drinking water?
Madam Chair, Representative Fisher, I'll begin, and then I know that MDA has been engaged in this work with as well. So our first effort is to create and implement a communication and coordination strategy within these 8 counties. Now, we have a program that was funded by the Clean Water Fund, a pilot program that we completed working with partners in Olmsted County and surrounding areas, primarily with the conservation districts, the SWCDs, doing a outreach program to well owners, doing testing and education about how folks can make sure that their well water is safe. So that is an excellent pilot project that will be basing our renewed efforts in our outreach and communication. Next, we will identify those areas that we know folks who have had testing done of private wells that exceed the nitrate standard, and we will be offering water for them, a safe and alternative drinking water source, based upon the prioritization of the most vulnerable communities. Primarily with nitrate, it's pregnant persons and infants under 1 year old. We then hope to implement a more robust voluntary well testing program with additional then remediation of those wells. Now, this will take significant funding and resources, and so we will be working with the Clean Water Council, with you next session, with our federal partners, and of course through the governor's office to see how do we fund these initiatives with the goal that we're protecting all Minnesotans from nitrate and other pollutants. I'll turn it over to MDA because they have already been engaged and done a great program of well testing in that area.
Yeah, so thanks for that question. I'll just add a few more things. The immediate response that will occur, we still continue to meet as agencies and really focus on the details of that. So as was the letter submitted last Friday, December 3rd to the EPA, as indicated in that letter, we will follow up by January 15th with a work plan that outlines a lot of the details and the first response in that area. So I think not too much to add to what Dan mentioned, which is we'll continue to focus on vulnerable populations, so folks that are pregnant or have infants in a household as a priority, and then to build off what we do know in these areas about elevated nitrate in private wells. Much of that came through the township testing program, so to think about what we can do with that data set now and then build on that as we move forward.
And then a follow-up along here, I was hearing that we may need significant dollars. What is the definition of significant? Because I'm in the health and human services world, and our definition of significant is much different than, say, in the environment world. So if you give us an idea of what significant means, are we talking millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions?
Madam Chair, Representative Fisher, we're currently working across our interagency partnership and with the governor's office to create what this will cost us. And once that is developed, we'll definitely be sharing it with you at the legislature.
So I'm understanding as of right now, there's not a definition of what significant dollars are. It's just, it will take additional appropriations. Okay. Next question I have, and this is going to, I know that a lot of work's been done to reduce use of nitrogen on the land, and that it takes time for sometimes this to present. What I wrestle with is I hear that and understand that, but there feels to me a disconnect. And where I feel that is when I see, you know, and we heard this at the last meeting, is that we're using more nitrogen now than we have ever before. And so I'm hearing, well, we're using better practices, but we're still using more nitrogen. It feels like there's a disconnect. And I need somehow to understand is that if we're using more nitrogen on the landscape now than we've had before, and we're saying, well, we're doing better practices, but we're not going to see it for 30 to 40 years, I'm kind of taking a look, well, we're still using more nitrogen. You know, how, you know, can you understand what my disconnect, if we're using more and we're being told we're using less when we're applying it? I don't see that meaning that in 30 or 40 years, we're going to see a significant change. And I've got to be misunderstanding somewhere in there. Can somebody help enlighten me as to what I'm not understanding this process?
Mm-hmm. Representative Fisher, I think just to address your question about the use of fertilizer, while the total tonnage sold in Minnesota was the highest reported this year, in general, we see a general trend of about the same amount of nitrogen sold over the last 10 years. So you are right that the absolute number is higher. I think that the key for us and what we focus on is nitrogen use efficiency. So really thinking about on an individual farm for that crop being grown, how can we maximize the efficient use of nitrogen? So I think to answer your question, it's a combination of both the crops grown, the acres that they were grown on, and then the amount of fertilizer that was applied across those acres. So it depends on kind of the combination, and if there's more corn grown in certain years or less corn grown, I think we could see a change in some of that fertilizer use as well.
So question that might help me is, and I don't know how to term it in the correct way, but so it's nitrogen is being applied, say a crop is using it, and there's free nitrogen that does not get used by the crop. So what I'm hearing you say is that because of the methods that we're doing now as well, we might have more row crops on the land, the amount that might be leaching out now is less than it was before?
Representative Fisher, not necessarily. I think it really, a lot of movement of nitrogen has to also do with the climate and the weather. And so we'd have to look at individual years to think about how leaching losses are a proportion of what is applied. So we do know that nitrate is a nutrient that can move along with water. It can be leaky in certain systems and not all is retained by the plant. So we also know that farmers can follow all those best management practices and some losses occur. So when we see really adverse or extreme weather events, wet springs, wet falls, we know that also can move nitrate with it. So I think it's more complex than just the total pounds of nitrogen sold. I think it really has to do with weather, cropping systems, and the combination there.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair, Senator Weber would like to respond to Representative Fisher's question.
Okay, and then I see Representative Jacob has his hand up too, so don't want to forget about him.
I didn't quite catch that. Anyway, I think one of the issues, as has been mentioned by the testifiers, yes, there was an increase last year. Much of that depends on how many acres of corn are growing. But if you look over the past number of years, and even by the amount of money that the AFREC program has taken in, that has remained consistent over the years. So what we are seeing is a tremendous increase in the yields of our commodity crops that use nitrogen. And quite frankly, when I graduated from high school almost 50 years ago, if my dad had 100 to 120 bushel corn, we had a big crop. And nowadays in my area, they're planting on 200 to 240 bushels an acre. And yet the amount of fertilizer that they're utilizing is not necessarily commensurate with the increase in yield that they are experiencing. But the more the greater yield that crop produces, the more of the nitrogen is used within that plant. And so I think that's part of why that disconnect you see there, is that we have to look at what that crop is producing, and it's utilizing much more of the nitrogen. And with the advanced soil testing techniques that are out there nowadays, our farmers are number one with precision planting. They're pinpointing their applications, they're doing it at multiple times, and they're not just throwing on a bunch of fertilizer in the spring and then forgetting about it. Yeah. So.
Madam Chair, Representative Scrava.
Well, hold on a second. You cut out? Was that Representative Scraba?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Okay. I'm going to let Representative Jacob go first since he had his hand up first, if that's okay.
Very good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, a question for the MDA. Do we have any type of record of what percentage of the wells that are considered to be contaminated, what percentage are built to code versus which ones are not? And I'd say also like some type of ratio of problems with, just in general, wells that are built to code versus wells that are not built to code. Because, you know, coming from a position of county commissioner, we've looked at this extensively in Winona County, and though it seems as though the problems come in areas where the wells are not built to code. So do we have records of that? Do we know about that?
Representative Jacobs, thanks for the question. So the answer to the question of do we have information about wells that are not to code, we have a subset of that information. So specifically through the township testing program, there was an initial test sample kit that was provided to all homeowners. And then as people returned those kits and had that analysis done at a certified lab, any well that had elevated nitrate or a detection of nitrate was offered a free follow-up sampling. It was during that follow-up sampling where a trained hydrologist went out to those individual wells and both collected another water sample for nitrate and pesticide sampling, as well as did a well inspection. It is from those follow-up surveys where we met at the home with the homeowner that we have information about are those codes up to, or those wells up to code or not. So again, it's a subset of the township testing information where we had an opportunity to follow up and do a well inspection. And during that time, it was documented if the well was up to code or not. And I could certainly share those statistics from the program, but I do not have that number with me here today.
Yeah, well, thank you. I would be interested if we know a percentage of where the problems are, how many of those are built to code and how many are not, because I don't think we're finding very many problems with modern wells that are built to code. So these are essentially many of the problems are in substandard wells. The second question, I guess maybe for the Department of Health, is the media in my area down here in southeast Minnesota, they like to focus on discussing about blue baby syndrome, and some of the research that I've been able to find here was the problem was much greater in the 1940s and 1950s. It was, I mean, they were seeing many dozens of cases in the area. It seems like you can't hardly find a case of it happening for a long time in the area. And I'm wondering if, of the cases that we're aware of, say in the last 15 years, do you have records of whether those were in southeast Minnesota or whether those were statewide or whether they were in the metro area or where those cases happened, and why are we seeing such a decrease in that problem when we seem to be focusing on higher levels of contamination at the same time in wells?
Madam Chair, Representative Jacob, I don't have the data right here on blue baby syndrome, also referred to as
Methemoglobinemia.
Thank you, Tanny.
I didn't
It's our
try
word
to
for
say
the
that word.
You and me both, Representative. But we can provide that for you and give you some further additional information on that. You know, blue baby syndrome is very serious. Nitrate will compete with oxygen in our hemoglobin. It actually converts hemoglobin and makes it unable to produce, transfer oxygen, which can be very serious. I will add that blue baby syndrome does result or can result in death, but depriving an infant of oxygen, even if that is reversed short of death, is still adds to adverse health outcomes. Blue baby syndrome is not a reportable disease in Minnesota, so our data is based upon those primary care physicians or healthcare physicians that consult with MDH and provide that data.
So I don't think I heard an answer to the question. Why have we seen such a tremendous decrease in the syndrome between the 1940s and 1950s and now? I mean, it appears as though it's like a 95% less of a rate that it's happening at now compared to what it did back in the 40s and 50s.
Madam Chair, Representative, I'll have to consult with our team to see what studies are out there that have analyzed that. Some of the factors that have changed that I would just posit have, been important there is one, as was already mentioned, the establishment of the Minnesota Well Code in the early 1970s, which did require wells built deeper and with casing. We also have just a better awareness of that now. We have a better health surveillance system, so people have better access to health care to take in infants and make sure that we address the situation before it becomes more severe. Nitrate management has changed. So I would say that there are multiple factors. However, I would want to consult to see if there are any peer-reviewed studies that have looked specifically at that question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Scraba?
Thank you. Can we all agree that snow adds nitrate to the ground? Is that a fact? When it snows, nitrates from the earth, air, come to the ground and it helps crops. Bill, your family knows. Any farmer knows that. Do you guys recognize that?
Representative, members of the committee, I think the question there is there an atmospheric deposition of nitrogen, and is that considered a source? And yes, while it is not a large source of nitrogen, there is deposition of nitrogen from the atmosphere onto the ground, yeah.
So when you say there's adverse amounts coming in, how do you determine whether it's humans putting it in or nature putting it in?
So specifically, I think there's been a number of scientific studies that have looked at nitrogen budgets. And so in general, taking into consideration all those sources and then the potential sinks. So while you can't determine once it's in the ground, nitrate is nitrate, and so there is no signature and it won't tell you where it came from, I think there's a very good understanding of generally contributions and what are natural occurring levels and where we see elevated levels that have some kind of anthropogenic input.
All right, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other brief questions? We are running very short on time, so I would like to wrap this section up, please. Okay, and I think our last two full presentations are, thank you very much, Department of Health, Department of Ag, for your comments and your answers to the questions. So look forward to seeing the plan come through in January.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Mr. Stark?
if I can make this suggestion, I want to apologize. I don't think we're going to be able to get to Mr. Rhodes' presentation on neonicotinoids. I would like Mr. Hurst, if he's here, to just abbreviate for 1 minute what he had to say, and I'll do the same thing.
Okay.
Okay, so I just want to say a few words about bills for your consideration based on your input and constituents. There are a number of them. They deal with safe drinking water, water retention, agriculture and water governance, the water allocation process, water sustainability, lakes, and other issues. So there are about a dozen of those that I would like the subcommittee to consider. We don't have time to talk about those today, but I'll be in touch with each of you, either personally or through a survey. I would hope you would take a moment to look at that survey. From that, we'll prepare the highest priority bills, look at bill authorship and bill introduction. So we'll spend more time on this at our January meeting, and we'll have things pretty well squared away for your introduction, should you want to do that. So with that, Mr. Hurst, are you here?
Yes, I'm present.
Mike, if you could just spend 2 or 3 minutes, and maybe if you want to share your screen, that'd be fine. Otherwise, if you can do that without that, that'd be okay too.
Okay, it says I can't share, so somebody might need to give me permissions for that.
You should be able to now. So.
Okay, very good. And so I think you can see.
We can see your screen.
Okay, I think you can maybe see the presentation piece up. So yes, again, my name is Mike Hurst. I actually presented to the committee back in September regarding the Keep It Clean campaign. I was going to go over that a little bit in just summary, but basically it's the addressing the human waste and garbage that's left on the ice during the ice fishing season. If many of you are aware of that problem and or follow the DNR, they just did a post about 5 days ago regarding the new legislation that was passed last year when we presented to your committee. And that law actually talks about making it illegal to store or place trash and waste on the ice. And so just from Facebook and all the things, there was over 500 comments on it. A lot of them very positive. People are saying, yes, about time, this is great. Others are saying it doesn't go far enough with the fine being only $100. Others say this is great, but what about amenities for dump stations, RV winter dump stations, and other means to assist this issue? So what we're looking for needs in the 2024 legislative session, we're looking for basically, okay, 3 main things. We're basically looking for a lead state agency. So last week, our Keep It Clean Coalition met with leaders from DNR, MPCA, and Bowser to kind of talk about who should be the lead agency for this, because we see a need. These are local efforts that need to be addressed locally, but we need some state assistance in being kind of that overall consistent message. So we're looking for a lead agency, which could be one of those 3, but there could also be a lead agency for granting. Bowser works with soil and water conservation districts and getting money out to the local areas, so that might be another option. So those folks are going to meet in the next week or so and kind of nail that down for us for our legislative piece. The second part is a grant program. We're looking for funding to go to local government units for 3 things: education awareness, resources and infrastructure, and regulation and enforcement. Those things are needed to make this positive throughout the state. So we're thinking 2 ways of funding. So part of that allocation would be just a base funding, and that would be based upon some of these things. This is an impartial list, and we're really working on this because this is difficult. Coming up with funding formulas are difficult. We're working with state agencies, but we're looking at how much water acreage is wholly within a county, the numbers and visitors angling hours per county. That's difficult because we don't have that everywhere. Number of public and private accesses, that's also difficult. We need to define that a bit more. Other factors by the lead agency, and then other items that the lead agency might put on there. The second part is a competitive funding that we're looking for these agencies or for local governments. So a lot of those are very similar, coming up with kind of that funding allocation and what that looks like. So that's a work in progress, but we'd welcome input from members of your committee. The last and third thing is an appropriation. Now, looking at what I work on Lake of the Woods, there's other partners that work on Red Lake and Mille Lacs. Some of the efforts that we've done, if all the counties were to kind of participate, and then this funding would also be for a lead agency. They're going to have staff time and things for that. So that's kind of built in. But we recognize that this legislative session, it might not be, in the cards for that. So we're also looking potentially at, a pilot program, targeting high traffic, high profile lakes or areas. So that's really my presentation in summary. Again, my name is Mike Hurst. We're with the Keep It Clean program. We've been working hard on this in Lake of the Woods for 10 years. And with our partners, this has exploded statewide, and it's a great thing for the state of Minnesota and water resources across the state. So with that, I'd take any questions.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your flexibility to be able to shorten your presentation. I appreciate it.
Madam
Any
Chair?
brief questions? Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, if there are questions? Didn't see any here. Madam Chair, I apologize to Mr. Rhodes. We will continue this at our next meeting, and I think we can give Mr. Hurst some additional time at our next meeting. I kind of flew through bills that I think the subcommittee might want to consider. I'll be in touch with each of you about those and hope to get some feedback from you about what you would be willing to support either individually or as a subcommittee. We won't be able to meet early in January because of a holiday when our meeting was scheduled and other conflicts with the LCC. And but we're looking at meeting near the end of January where we'll talk in some detail about all of these bills and your ideas and get your feedback. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you for your support and your work on this. I'll leave this up to you to sign off, but happy holidays to all of you.
Thank you for taking the extra couple minutes to hang around committee. If you could just a plug to respond to Mr. Stark's survey with thoughtful feedback, I think that would get us on a really good start for next session. I want to apologize to Mr. Rhodes myself. Thank you for your patience and understanding, but looking forward to seeing you guys in January. I hope everybody has a good holiday season. And with that, we will adjourn. Thank you.